We'll move to our first agenda item with the meat processing. Morning, gentlemen. That's correct. Yeah, you know, Vern, I want to thank you personally. I know you were at the Bison Range celebration, but you're one of those folks in the crowd there that had a lot of background work with the whole Bison Range restoration over time. So I want to thank you personally.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is it already up then? Yeah. Oh, I see it.
So good morning, Tribal Council. Before Vern and Raven Consulting gives their presentation, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about this project, if it's okay to proceed.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this project was basically initiated a few years ago when we met with the tribal cattle producers and we asked them how the Economic Development Office could help them with getting a better price for their cattle. And what we found was they needed to look at different markets. They needed to look at different ways to finish their cattle rather than just simply selling calves in the fall. And so what we did is we wrote a value-added producers grant last spring, and that's what is funding this project, this feasibility study and business plan that Vern and Raven Consulting have completed. And then we also received money from the Northwest Area Foundation as match for this grant. And I just wanted to give some recognition to Mission Mission West Community Development Partners, who helped us write the Value Added Producers Grant a year ago. And they also helped with presentations to the cattle producers over the last couple of years. So, and I wanted to thank the cattle producers as well for their excellent input over these last several months. You know, they just basically helped us learn about the potential for how many animals they'd have available to sell and what kind of prices that they've been getting in the past and, you know, what some of their barriers are. So I just wanted to give some recognition to all of those groups. Thank you. And thank you again to Raven Consulting for their excellent work.
Thank you, Janet.
So we'll begin the presentation. This part of the presentation is the business plan. In the last presentation that we were here, we went over the feasibility study reports with you. And this project, this business plan represents construction of a new facility that would be USDA inspected. It's a multi-species slaughter and processing plant. The plant would be originally developed to process approximately 18 to 25 animals per week, including beef, bison, hogs, and wild game. Slaughtering would be done in the plant 2 to 3 days a week, and then the staff would switch over and do the processing of the meat carcasses the remainder of the week. We estimate that there would be 7 full-time workers in the plant. The plant would begin at about 3,000 square feet, including and then include the corrals, holding pens, water wells for the plant, waste disposal sewer systems, composting stations for decomposting the waste tissue. And then we also included in the plan the ability to haul some of the waste product off. So we have built into the plan a heavy duty pickup and a dump trailer, and also a stock trailer, small stock trailer if that need arises. So the total cost of the plan would be about $2.1 million, a little under $2,135,000. Startup costs would be estimated at $23,925. We assumed the tribe would contribute $400,000 to the beginning of the project to get the initial phases underway and get cash flow through the first year of operation. The total of $2,159,000 was projected to be financed. We built into the plan the financing at 5% interest for a 10-year loan with annual payments. You may be able to get a lower interest rate than that if you were to secure that loan with a certificate of deposit and guarantee the loan by a certificate of deposit. That does a couple of things for you. Guaranteeing a loan with a certificate of deposit will allow you to get beyond the loan limit per customer at banks, and it'll also allow you to utilize your own bank, Eagle Bank, without limitations for how much the owner operator can borrow from that because it is guaranteed. So it's a different way. Typically, these type of loans are structured so that you place the CD at the bank, pledge a guarantee against that CD for the term of the loan. And so whatever you receive for interest on that CD, then the cost of interest is usually 2% above that. So it's kind of a win-win situation if you look at it that way. We also looked at other sources of funding. So it's possible that you may be able to get some grants or outside source funding to lower that loan amount. There are grants that are currently available through USDA Rural Development. The state of Montana Department of Agriculture has some grants that are out. Most of those grants have very short deadlines if they have not already passed. But in our research, it indicated that there would likely be more funds coming in from Washington, D.C. to supplement or to expand rural small meat processing plants. They're trying to get away from the major 4 plants. And so there's a lot of money coming out and has been coming out to, excuse me, to develop these plants and back in communities where they used to be. So there should be some more funds coming out. I also looked at the new market tax credit program for a possibility that meat processing plants would qualify under that program. However, in most cases, the new market tax credit program will not do a project that's under $5 million because of the cost of developing the project and so forth. So that may be an option, but because this project is considerably less than $5 million, it may not be feasible to do that. Revenues of the plant would be generated from a combination of sales of processing services, including processing of wild game, sale of processed beef, bison, and pork, and value-added products. There are, in our proposal of the plant, we would include a full kitchen. So it would be the plant would have the capability of curing hams and making jerky or smoked meats or bacon or things like that are value added. And then there's a number of other value added products that the plant might be able to get into that are fairly economical. We looked at the first year of operation as a beginning, and of course, the marketing is going to be a bit difficult to break into. So we didn't start in our cash flow position. We didn't start with a full operation. We assumed that revenues would be about 50% of capacity in the first year, moving up to 75% in the second year. And by the third year, the market should be pretty well established and should be at full capacity. The project itself, when we began, had objectives to determine whether the feasibility of purchasing a mobile slaughter unit would be feasible. In our studies and research, we just couldn't make the thing pencil out. It was too expensive of a product to purchase. The number of animals that you could process through it here, moving from ranch to ranch to slaughter animals and then deliver them to a processing plant, was just too expensive and constrained too much. We then moved to looking at phase 2, which would include operations of the mobile slaughter unit, and taking those, contracting with processors to break down those meats, and then we had included building a cooler to store that meat and then sell it to wholesale or retail. The problem we ran into there is that the only way you can really do that is to find a processing plant that is either state inspected or USDA inspected to be able to move your product into the market. So you have to retain that chain of inspection from your USDA inspected slaughter facility to the processing plant. And then the processing plant would use their label because USDA requires that you have a way to backtrack all meats that are sold to the public back to the processing plant that it came from. So that led us to the third scenario, which then develops this business plan. Going back and we developed a number of surveys that we sent out to producers and processors and restaurants and grocery stores. And the results of those came back that obviously there are enough cattle on the reservation, raised on the reservation. One of the questions on our survey indicated whether or not the producer could hold their calves over the winter, so we knew whether there would be a supply of older cattle to be grass-fed and fill the processing plant. And that turned out to be so. There are a sufficient number of cattle raised on the reservation to do that. One of the results of the surveys came back from the processors that most of the processors here on the reservation are either retail exempt or custom exempt. So retail exempt allows them to purchase USDA or state inspected carcasses, meat products, and reproduce those into value-added products and sell them through their retail office. They cannot do slaughtering to use that meat for sell wholesale or retail. And so one of the things that showed up was we ended up with a bottleneck, because the big bottleneck wasn't really slaughtering the animals. The big bottleneck was the capacity to process the animals. The processors were backlogged already. You could go to Missoula, to Kalispell. The processors that were either state inspected or USDA inspected were also backed up months behind. So if you slaughtered more animals, there just is no place to take them and get them processed. So that led us to the third segment that we got to here, which is the full-scale processing. So it includes a slaughter plant, processing, breakdown. It has a retail space in it, has the freezers and coolers and whatnot that you need to do the full processing. So that's where we ended up with our third scenario.
So moving on to the marketing plan. We designed this marketing plan for scenario 3, which is the processing plant. We identified in the business plan the target markets, which would include not only selling processed meats at the plant itself, but also selling directly to local schools, grocers, but with butchers, and then Northwestern region restaurants and casinos with restaurants. Other target markets would include tribal programs such as Early Childhood Services, Tribal Senior Citizen Center, SKC 3 Wolves, and then also obtaining federal government contracts. Products offered, as Vern mentioned a little bit earlier, is processed meats, sales of carcasses, sides, quarters, and box meats, and then value-added products such as jerky, snack sticks, smoked meats, in addition to your regular cuts of ground steaks and roasts, and then your pork products. And then to reduce waste, there's also the option of other value-added products such as producing bone broth, collagen peptides, pet foods, fertilizers. We projected with product volume and growth expectations, as Vern mentioned earlier, an average of 19 animals per week processed through the processing plant. The efficiency of this plant obviously is going to depend on the quality of staff hired, including the manager that's assigned to this processing plant. And the plant should be designed such that carcass coolers and refrigerated frozen storage can be expanded if added capacity is needed in the future. The marketing budget in the first year of the operations of the plant, you're obviously going to start off with local newsprint and social media to get the word out of this product. Cold calling by the manager and staff to reach out to markets, as we mentioned before. And then the manager, as we said, the manager that's hired needs to be aggressive in establishing and developing this customer base in order to get this product out there and to meet our scenarios that we played out with years 1, 2, and 3. And then when it comes to a label, an attractive label should be produced for the value-added meat products. This process may take 1 to 2 years to get USDA FSIS to approve it. So work on that should be started immediately. All information on the label has to be approved by FSIS and USDA. So that's why it can take some time to get it approved. Another marketing strategy would include the Intertribal Agricultural Council. They have a made and produced by American Indians product label. That's been successfully test marketed since 1993. So that's an opportunity to use and identify on the label of this processing plant's produced meats. Storage and distribution. The plant should be designed to have adequate refrigerated and frozen capacity for the products available. Refrigerated box storage should be adequate for up to 7 days beyond processing. Frozen storage should be adequate for several weeks beyond processing. And then for delivery to like businesses, schools, and whatnot from the plant, usually processed meats sold wholesale to those customers. You want to deliver those with 2 to 3 hour driving radius, and that can be done easily with just a van and large coolers. If you're delivering beyond the 2 to 3 hours, it's suggested that you have a refrigerated delivery unit for that. When it comes to competition, there's only one USDA inspected processing plant in the valley. So if you were to go with being USDA inspected, competition is low. You can also go with the option of state inspected, but there are limits on being state inspected, although they've expanded those to, what's that? In March to cross state lines, selling products beyond state lines, as long as the state has an agreement with that other state. But as far as our focus was, you know, USDA inspected custom plant, processing plant, because there is such limited competition. There's a lot of processors in the valley that could use your USDA inspection label. And then the other part of the competition is being a tribally operated business. You have competitive advantage for pursuing federal government contracts. Federal government usually pursues minority-owned businesses, so that's an advantage on obtaining those contracts. And then the other part of being a taxed, tribally owned business is a tax advantage. Under a Section 17 corporation, it would not have an income tax.
So, question on the labeling from FSIS. Does your facility have to be built first? I mean, you can start the unique labeling, you know, application before you're establishing. What actual point can you really start that?
You can start it before you're in production. You're not going to get it approved until you can produce the product and they can test the product. So it's a process that you want to time so that you're not waiting for 1.5 to 2 years to get approval to move your product, but you do have to have a product that they can test before they can approve the label. All the ingredients of a label, all ingredients of the contents have to be stated on the label, and so they have to make sure that those are okay within their regulations.
And then I assume that any of the unique labels from, you know, minority or those doesn't require the same stringent testing.
No, you just have to be able to, you know, how you wording on the label is tricky, because you need to, they will test all of it to make sure that it's completely up and up. So if you say these are natural fed grass animals, you need to be able to prove that they are natural grass fed animals, that you're not mixing in other animals that are not grass fed, grass finished. If you are utilizing the fact that you're Native American government, of course, you have to have documentation to provide for that too. So
I always wonder about some of that. I mean, oh, this is free range chicken eggs. Well, who's that free range chicken cop that's out there checking that?
there are USDA used to go out to ranches and certify the ranches as to whether they used any hormones or antibiotics or growth or other types of finishing product. There are a couple of companies that do go out and still go out and will do certifications, but USDA has backed off of that a bit, and they have relied upon the processors to be able to provide evidence, if they're asked, that where these animals came from and the proof that they are what they say. So it's a little bit different now in that you don't necessarily have a certification from every ranch, but it's still up to the processor to verify, be able to verify that information.
Okay, I know that in the past I've heard from different large casino tribes that they reserve purchasing a certain percentage from Native American businesses, Native American made products. And do you have a feeling for how big that market might be?
We contacted, made phone contact with, I don't remember how many, almost all of the ones that I could locate in the Northwest from the middle of Washington east, and Idaho and Montana, and figured out which of those casinos had restaurants associated with them. and whether or not they would be interested. And they all showed, all that had restaurants indicated that their programs utilized Native American processors. So that's a pretty broad market if you can attain that market.
Which kind of segues into our next section on the 3-year marketing strategy. So as mentioned earlier, the first year is going to be the important year when this plant is in operation. There will be some difficulty when introducing the new product into the market, but it's difficult but not impossible. You have to be aggressive. You have to have consistency of the product, which falls back onto your staff. You have to have quality product. The market is there. All the research that we've done shows that there are a lot of restaurants and casinos and whatnot that are going towards this grass-fed, grass-finished trend. And then the other one is the bison market. So the market is there. The manager has to just be aggressive and establish that customer base. And like most things through word of mouth, once like where I buy my meat, you know, is based on what people tell me about farm to market pork or something, lower value meats. Word of mouth is going to spread. So if you can consistently produce that quality product, years 2 and 3, which year 3 is where we project to be at 100% capacity, it's going to fall in line a lot easier. And then there are other partners that you can collaborate with. Western Montana Growers Cooperative. If you can get that product with them, they distribute out to their members, and then also collaborating with Mission West Community Development Partners.
So I'm going to back up a little bit, but we're not talking about a feedlot or anything in this operation.
No, this operation does not include a feedlot. In some of our conversations with producers, there was a recommendation by the producers that it should include a feedlot, that the company should buy the calves in the fall so that their operation doesn't need to change, and then the company would finish them out. My recommendation is if you are interested in going that route, that is really a separate business and should be kept separate and apart from your processing plant. The regulations governing processing of red meat begins as soon as the animal enters the property. So it doesn't make any difference whether it's in your truck bringing that animal in or the rancher's truck bringing that animal in. As soon as it comes on the property of the processing plant, that animal has to be treated in a certain way, and there are regulations that govern how that has to happen. So a finishing plant should be a separate business, separate and apart. Could be located in the same location, but it should probably be a separate business operation. So the next section is a definition of the licensing or the inspection process. And they don't necessarily call it licensing. They call it a grant of inspection. So there are 4 inspection types that you can get. The USDA is the top, and that allows you to slaughter under that USDA inspection, process the meat and sell it in-state, out-of-state, and to some foreign countries. So it's really the one option that you can do the most under. The next one is state inspection. State inspection up until recently this year in Montana has been, and not every state has a state inspected program, but in Montana they have a state inspected program, and up until March of this year, the restriction was that you can do anything you can under USDA, except all of your product has to stay in the state of Montana. You could not sell to any state and cross the state line. In March of this year, the USDA and the state of Montana entered into an agreement that some other states have entered into also with USDA, which allows state inspected plants to apply for selling their products across state lines. The difficulty that I see in reading the regulations is you really need to know whether the state you're going to move your product into is also a part of this CIS program, which is under USDA, because those are the only states that you're allowed to sell your product under this program from a state inspected plant. The next one is a retail exempt. Retail exempt is a little bit more restrictive in that there are limitations on the amount of wholesale meat that you can move out of your plant, and all of the meat that you use to either produce value-added products like jerky or smoked items or things like that, that you're going to sell under retail or wholesale, have to come from a USDA or a state inspected plant. Here on the reservation, there are no state inspected plants yet. There's only one USDA plant. So obviously those producers that have retail stores included in their processing plants under retail exempt have to purchase from a USDA plant. The meat that they use has to be USDA inspected first before it reaches them. And that's a backlog right now. So that also indicates that there's a good potential for demand for another USDA inspected plant. That's another customer that you can get there. Custom exempt is the fourth, and custom exempt allows that processor to process meats for the owner of the animal only. So, and the owner of the animal cannot resell that product. They have to use it in their household. So or a lot of game animals and ranch animals that are slaughtered and processed for the ranch itself are going through custom exempt. When you start to apply for the grant of inspection, there are basically 7 steps that you will go through. The first step is you need to have a approved water source system, either a well that's tested or a municipal system that's tested. Obtain a sewer system letter that indicates that you have the sewer system that's capable of handling the product. Facilities must meet regulatory performance standards. You then file an application for inspection, obtain approved labels and brands, provide a written standard operation procedure for sanitation, and then provide a written hazard analysis and a HACCP plan, which is the hazard analysis and critical control points plan. So those items have to be in place before you can get a inspection grant. USDA plant requirements. Most of the requirements that the plant has to operate under will be found in Title IX of the Code of Federal Regulations. Chapter 1 of Title IX addresses the animal inspection, and Chapter 3 covers FSIS requirements and responsibilities. Most of the requirements that you would operate come under there. There are some other additional requirements for the meat processing. The humane handling and stress on animals is an important issue. There are a couple of acts that regulate that. Humane Methods of Slaughter Act and the Federal Meat Inspection Act are 2 of those that will guide how the animals must be dealt with. Permits and certifications, the hazard analysis critical control point and the sanitation standard operation procedures and the good manufacturing practices all have to be written and in place. And those are recommended to be written by someone who has had the training for the HACCP program. Treatment of specified risk materials. The only specified risk materials on beef carcasses that need to be disposed of are the spinal column and the tonsils if the processor is selling the tongue. For animals that are over 30 months old, there are some more requirements. The head, the vertebral bone, dorsal root ganglia all have to be disposed of either by decomposing or by hauling to a plant. The effluent and water use, the processing plant will require a water source of good quality. It has to have low nitrates and sulfates, be potable and high volume per gallon. Typically a beef animal requires approximately 300 to 450 gallons of water for each carcass. So if you're going to do a number of them, you have to have a well and water capacity that will handle that. Based upon your water capacity needs, that produces your estimates for your effluent, your sewer system discharge. And then it's recommended that when the construction is done, that all of the drainage that goes into your sewer system passes through screens to pick up the larger pieces of particles that you don't want going into your system and plugging it up. The next is cooling and chilling. Basically to aid in keeping the animal, the carcass and the meat from spoiling, there are recommendations that you need to follow that within 1 and 1.5 hours of slaughtering, the carcass needs to be in a chilled facility. They want the animal carcass to be down to 40 degrees within 16 hours from the time that it's slaughtered. So there is a recording of that's kept in the plant so that you can verify that you're meeting those standards. And that's basically just to reduce the risk of bacterial infection in the meat and so forth.
So for the plant size and scope, we looked at the available livestock in the valley and then the initial development of a market in the area. And that's how we came up with a 3,000 square foot meat processing plant, which is considered your smaller meat processing plants. There's a lot of studies and reports available to the public as far as designing and constructing these types of plants. And we included those in our works cited page at the end of this business plan. The sizing and equipment needs of the estimated construction costs provided in these studies have been incorporated into our financial feasibility reports that we'll go over later. As Vern mentioned earlier, when it comes to carcass chill time before boning, beef cattle is usually 48 hours, bison is 48 hours per carcass, and then hogs is 24 hours. So you want to make sure you have the capacity in your chilling area for the animals that you produce, which we estimate at 19 animals per week. We provided a construction cost startup of the plant, commercial septic drain, which includes this commercial septic drain field, animal receiving pens and concrete pads. The equipment startup costs include a skid steer loader, stock trailer, dump trailer, heavy duty pickup, delivery van, and then your smaller office equipment items like cell phones and computers. As far as your internal plant equipment, from one of those studies, they had a good list of what all would be needed for a small processing plant. And so the table 621 in this business plan lists out what part of the plant this equipment is needed for and what the equipment item is. And then we estimate the total of all that equipment at $525,000, with 90% of that equipment being new and 10% being used. Obviously, those costs can change depending on that ratio when you're purchasing this internal plant equipment. Staffing, we staffed it at 7 full-time positions. The administrative positions include the manager and administrative assistant. The floor operations of the plant would include 2 butchers and 3 full-time assistants. And those full-time assistants not only help with the processing, but they also are responsible for the cleaning and the maintaining of the processing plant. This table 631 shows our staffing labor costs and how we calculated those. And then our operation costs includes estimates for utilities, property insurance, and vehicle fuel, which do at this current time do have a high potential for fluctuation in the future. And so those need to be considered when we look at our 3-year cash flows estimates. And then the business formation of the plant, as we mentioned earlier, it'd be operated as business under Section 17 corporation, which would be wholly owned by CSKT. This can segregate the tribal business assets and liabilities from the assets and liabilities of the tribal government, and also provides a competitive advantage in that this business would not be subject to income tax. Management of the plant, we recommend that the tribal government would select a board of directors, and then the board of directors would be responsible for seeking out and finding the general manager of the plant. And the general manager would be responsible for financial oversight of the plant, personal management, which would include hiring and managing all workers, quality control and working with the USDA inspector, processing operations, managing the day-to-day processing activities and setting processing schedules, customer service, and then regulatory compliance. As far as the workforce training in the state of Montana, currently Miles City Community College is the only one that provides a curriculum on meat processing, and that is a certification and not a degree. As we mentioned in our last presentation, Montana State University Northern in Havre is pursuing a curriculum in meat processing, but that is not complete, or I think they're doing a feasibility study as of now.
Yeah, they're waiting for the results of a feasibility study that they kicked off to determine whether they would have enough student interest to support this curriculum. So it sounded, when I talked to the Dean of Science and Technology, it sounded like he wasn't sure that they would be able to get the curriculum up and going. He didn't feel that there were enough students interested in this curriculum to support it. And so his interest, I think, is moving more towards, when I talked to him anyway, moving more towards Miles City certification. And Miles City certification has a set schedule of courses that need to be taken, and then through that process, the students are interned out to processing plants. If you go forward with this, I would highly recommend that you get in contact with Miles City Community College and become one of their plants that they send the students out to. That'll give you a good opportunity to see the student in action, see what interest they have in this, whether they're really interested in it, how good they are, and what their work ethics are before you have to hire them. So, you know, you're going to be looking for workers all the time in this business. It has a fairly high turnover in some of the positions. So that's a very good opportunity for you to take a look at these individuals before bringing them on a permanent basis.
For the Section 8, the financial plan, as we mentioned earlier, the 3-year sales and cash flows projections we start off the first year with revenues at 50% and then increasing those to the third year where revenues, the plant is fully operational with revenues at 100%. And then as far as the expenditures, the operating expenses, we do calculate in salaries adjusted to 4% each year to account for cost of living adjustments or raises. And then, as we mentioned earlier, our long-term debt is financed at 5% over 10 years. This is the feasibility study that we went over the last time with the plant. As we showed before, it lists out the plant equipment, the materials and supplies needed in the first year, and then you have your startup costs. And then after that, you've got your operational costs, which includes your salaries and staffing, and then your other operating costs as listed there. And then when you move down to the next page, we go into the revenues, the cost of goods sold of processing, selling the different types of meats, whether it's beef, pork, or bison. And then bottom line of gross profit per year. And then we subtract out the depreciation and the loan payment and operating net profit at $340,000 a year. And this is our estimates. This is all based on 100% operation. So when we go into the cash flows, you're going to notice these numbers are a little bit different with lower revenues in years 1 and 2 until you reach 100% capacity. So with our cash flows, we started the first year by breaking down estimates per month. And then you include the $400,000 CSKT, the tribe would put into this business to help keep this business in the black for the first year and a half until it is in more of a higher, closer to 100% operation. Starting estimates, we also tried to calculate in revenue estimates based on seasonal purchases of animals in that first year. And then taking those first year numbers, then we introduce our 3-year cash flows. So in the first year, our cash position ends at $226,000 and some change, and that's including that $400,000 capital interjection. And then as revenues increase from year 1 to year 2, you're in a more positive position. And then by year 3, you're approaching, you're about $750,000 as a cash position. And that's after your loan payments are made too. When it comes to the net income, when you these net income worksheets do not include the $400,000 injection by the tribe. So that's why your first year you show a net operating loss of $161,000. So that initial investment by the tribe would be important in keeping this business operational in the first year. And then as you see each year, the net profit grows. This is just a balance sheet. That's for us accountants, we get nerdy about, but nothing exciting here.
So your financial summary, basically due to the inefficiencies in the startup costs and getting those things lined out, you're going to have the first year that's going to cost you money. That's why we recommend the $400,000 be put in to the corporation to keep them afloat in the first year. By the second year, you're in a pretty good position. You should be in a pretty good position. In third year, you should be in full position. We tried to remain as conservative as we could on these costs. So the construction cost, as you recall, when we presented the feasibility report, we use $400 a square foot for the construction of the building. You should be able to construct that with no problem at $400,000. including the equipment, not the plant equipment, but the HVAC system and cooling systems and so forth that are required in the plant. You may be able to even beef that square footage up a little bit. One of the things that we recommend is later in this project, we were introduced to an individual, Chris Roper. Chris Roper was instrumental in helping develop the Quapaw plant, which is a much larger plant. It's a 25,000 square foot plant. But he had, in discussions with him, he had also been involved in a number of different size plants. So he is under contract with the USDA to provide training and technical assistance and advice to tribal governments who are looking to get into or expand their meat processing plants. He is an excellent person with a lot of experience, years of experience in developing these. He knows how they need to be developed, how the floor plans need to be laid out, and what equipment is needed for the processing plant itself. So he would be an excellent person to keep in mind to get the development of this going and moving. And of course, we're also available if you wish for consulting services if and when you get the processing plant moving. It's difficult in the state of Montana to find, and maybe across the country, to find architect and engineering services that are familiar with the requirements of a meat processing plant. So that's going to be something that will, if you appoint a board to your corporation, form the corporation and appoint a board, that board then is going to have to work diligently on that to get that completed. And Chris Roper is also an individual, I think, that is familiar enough with most of the plants that were built under him, that he would perhaps know some good A&E firms to utilize, and who knows what they're doing. So with that, we would like to ask if there are any questions concerning any of this project that we might be able to answer at this point.
Yeah, one question. I know that they just opened up a new plant somewhere in Montana, and it was the prefab plant. So it's modular units. They're just steel, look like the cargo trailers, and they come in units like that are manufactured somewhere. You just set it up like a trailer house, and they connect together. And I just saw one of those open up somewhere in central Montana, and that's the exact plant that the Fort Peck tribe is looking at putting in. And so it's all engineered and pre-done. So as far as the square footage, did you get a chance to look at something like that, Vern?
Friesla is a company that has those modules that they'll construct. It's a kind of a unique structure in that they design it so that you can add additional units. So if you need additional processing space, you just add another module to that, and it's another processing. If you need additional storage, chilling, cooling, freezing, those come in components. The difficulty that I think most are going to find with them, they're real efficient once you're in the unit to do the processing, but they're fairly expensive. As you can imagine, they are more expensive than building your own plant. So they are easy to expand. In the discussion with Chris Roper, some of the designs that he has for layouts of a plant would include building like half of a building. And so it would be, the roof would have a single slope on it. And then you design your freezers and your cooling spaces and processing spaces in your kitchen in such a way on the first half that when you add the second half of that building, you don't have to move anything and all of your products flows stay the same. That's really important in USDA inspection, because as you process that from the animal to the kill station to breakdown and processing and coolers, you can't cross those back. So you have to have a flow of work that guarantees that you're not going to cross contaminate those products when you're moving them through your plant from start to finish. So these units that add on, when we looked at them, they'd be great for certain types of processing, but it does create some difficulty in adding another unit on, moving that back through and keeping from crossing your lines. So, but they are cropping up. I know that I think it's Jefferson County is looking at a plant, and the individual I talked to was looking at this type of a startup. Their rationale was that it would be easy to start with just the basics, and then as you went, just keep adding on the components as you needed them. And that's a good plan if it works out for you, and if you have the area to plan out for future expansion. But
Was there, when you talked about the size of the facility, 30,000 square foot?
3,000.
3,000 square. Was there a location? Was there any advantage to a particular spot on the reservation or off the reservation for the facility?
there was some discussion about location. It kind of depends on where you want to go. If you want to have a part of the area that you designate for this plant to also be a finishing, you're gonna be looking at one type of property, but you're gonna have to make sure that you have property that has adequate water, meets the requirements, and enough area for your decomposting and effluent discharge. So we didn't get down to a location or a recommendation of a location. My understanding is that the tribe has recently purchased a piece of property, which is about 300 acres, I believe, between Ravalli and Dixon, that you might want to look at for meeting all those requirements. So
I know that if you wanted to think big and add on in the future, that I met with some gentlemen at the beginning of the month, I can't remember, but they were proposing a very large facility that the tribe should be interested in. And they were building a brand new one down in Idaho Falls, and it's 66,000 square feet, and it provides 200 jobs, but it's capturing a large market. It's trying to capture the Canadian market coming down, so they're not going all the way to Nebraska, et cetera. There's probably a feedlot associated with it somewhere down there, but it's quite an expansion of a need that's out there. There's opportunity, but I don't know where you get 200 jobs, workforce.
if you had a 66,000 square foot plant, you would be importing the majority of your product from out of state. So you'd have to have a feedlot, and you'd have to have contracts with other feedlots to supply that. That is a huge operation.
Yeah, huge operation, and they believe there's room to double what they're doing, and they want to do it in Montana. So anyway, so having a facility and have it be able to grow is kind of important. But along with that, then knowing that producers were asking for that feedlot type scenario, was there any idea of a location for that, if there was?
There wasn't a location discussed or identified that I can recall. One of the benefits, if you go forward and have a processing plant USDA inspected, some of the local producers in discussions have already begun trying to design their own markets or create their own markets. But what they need is the animals to be slaughtered in a USDA or a state inspected plant. And they can take that animal and they can market it wherever they want, provided they have the label and inspection process completed. But that's probably the biggest benefit that I can see to producers that want to move that direction. Most producers are much better at producing the animals than marketing the animals. So, you know, that's been one of the drawbacks that we discovered in talking to several of the cooperatives that we met with in this process. The cooperatives were made up of 8 to 10 ranchers that come together and want to purchase a processing plant. So they purchased a processing plant, USDA inspected, and then from there, it just never met their expectations because unless they hire somebody to run that and take care of it, they're busy dealing with their livestock and their ranching operation. And marketing is difficult. It takes somebody kind of special to be able to, on their own, get out and market. I think Jace has done quite a bit of that on his own, and some other local producers have also done that. But it's a, as Jace could say, it's a tough go.
I guess that one other question I have, was there any consideration, because we started from scratch in a venture that really doesn't happen in Montana, and that's the commercial fish business. So we built a plant and created a corporation, et cetera, and we're operating that. Was there any consideration to blending this with that, utilizing that structure that's already there, or cross-pollinating workers?
We didn't include any of that in our workup, so that might be a possibility. I don't know what regulations you are up against
Virtually
on
the same.
fish versus red meat, or whether they're the same or close enough to be
Nearly
able
the same, yeah.
to combine.
We market only in Montana.
Yeah, that's a consideration, that you may already have some of the basics then in place for the business.
Carol?
Yeah, I was curious about how long the certification takes in Miles City. Do you have any idea on that?
It's about 18 months, I believe. There are a number of classes, and what the certification really tries to prepare the student for is not just cutting or boning, but there are business classes that they take, and basically they want the student to be able to come out of that with the ability to start their own processing plant if they want to go that direction, or to be the head butcher in a processing plant. Part of the internship requires them to go to be assigned to multiple plants, so that they see more than just one operation, and they're introduced to a number of operations. I think there's like 14 weeks, if I recall, that they need to be out in that in-plant processing training. And I think in the feasibility study, I included the course that curriculum consists of, so you can take a look at that and see the courses and
Okay.
yeah.
Everybody's heard the word moink, right? They advertise it on the radio all the time, and it's moo plus oink. And you hear it, and they, seems like just within the last couple of years, started advertising for, not meat processing, but selling meat and things like that. That is raised organic, not organically, but similar to that. But I wanted to mention, I have a niece who works at Super One in the meat department. And so I know there's people, and there's other descendants that work in those meat departments. And so there is an interest of people who have worked in the meat arena. But I was wondering about how the process of, once it's processed, do they sell that product to like a grocery store? Is that how that works?
The processing plant would, yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
the processing plant would purchase the animal from the producer, the rancher, break that carcass down to various products. And typically restaurants buy what are called primal cuts. So those are steaks and prime cuts that large restaurants have their own butchers. They take those boxed products and they break them down into individual steaks and so forth.
So truly.
Grocery stores do the same thing. So your grocery store butchers today, very few of them know how to take a carcass and break it down. Most of them have boxed primal cuts come in. So if they're looking for certain steaks, then they get that section of the carcass delivered to them and they break that down. In the local grocery stores, they're getting carcasses, they're getting boxed meats, and they're getting primal cuts in talking to them. So most of them have a fairly good understanding of how to break them down and how to retain the profitability. That was one thing that several of the processors indicated, that when you hire your main butcher, your top butcher for the plant, make sure that they know how to break down a carcass, because there's a big difference in a butcher store, a grocery store butcher and a processing butcher in breaking that down. And you can lose a lot of money if that butcher doesn't really understand how to save all the good parts of the carcass. So
I think the marketing aspect would really be to take out that middleman and, allow the producer to get the price that they deserve, plus the producer or processing make money, and then the store make money, and get rid of that middle person that always seems to grab up the biggest part of the money that's raised off of selling the product.
there are a lot of opportunities, options that can produce for a processing plant that can produce additional revenues. If one of your goals is to assist the producers, and I assume that it is, the plant itself might give up some revenues to assist that producer in creating additional revenue from their product for themselves. You also have the ability to bump that price up when you buy the product. When you buy the animal, bump that product up a little bit so that the producer gets a little better price on their product.
Thank you, Vern. I know I'm interested in the tribe's own bison and cattle herds along with tribal producers. So with that, Martin and then Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vern. Yeah, I think the same people talked to me about the processing plant, and they were looking over on the west side and utilizing the thermal aspect of some of the finishing, and it would speed things up, and it would be, they had all these reasons why. But I know that also, I don't know if Hot Springs is the area that we want to put a meat processing plant, if we're also trying to develop it for other things. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Janet?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think one of the biggest factors when we're trying to help the producers get a better price is the whole issue of finishing the cattle. And I believe I heard Vern say in past meetings that there would not be as much profitability in that particular operation. I'm just wondering if he thinks we'd be able to break even if we're having to finish the cattle over the winter, the calves over the winter, produce hay, and then to guarantee a certain amount of product that we can be processing throughout the year and selling throughout the year. So I guess I'm wondering, what your thoughts are with regard to that finishing operation, and what it would take to develop a business plan for that, and how profitable you think that might be.
I think that would begin primarily with determining a parcel of property that could support that kind of operation. Obviously, it would require a complete new feasibility study. It would require some research into whether you would hire a manager to run a ranch operation to finish those animals, produce your own hay and feed, or whether you would purchase it. There are a lot of issues related to that kind of operation that would require considerable study to determine whether you could break even or not in that operation.
So would you be willing to look at that 300-acre ranch between Dixon and Ravalli to, maybe just give us kind of a quick overview of whether or not it has the right amount of land and water yields that would possibly be needed both for finishing and for the processing plant?
Are you asking me to do that under this contract that ended, or?
No. So I guess what I'd like you to do is maybe submit a proposal to me, and then we can, look at a scope of work and advertise it, of course, but see if that's something we could possibly work on this summer, just to keep this project moving along.
We would be interested in working on that, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? What do you need us to do from here, Janet?
Well, I guess, so because these two documents were funded by USDA Rural Development, we just need approval for us to be able to share them because they are funded with federal dollars. And then probably approval from council for us to move forward and try to write an RFP to hire either Raven or another firm to continue work on a feasibility study and business plan for the finishing operation, and to actually look at the site that we've talked about, the 300-acre site between Dixon and Ravalli.
Okay. Any motions to approve the processing study and business plan? Motion by Jennifer. Second by Ellie. Any further discussions? All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. Well, one out of the room, Len out of the room, unanimous. And would we I'd entertain a motion to continue to have staff work on additional funding, feasibility of a finishing plant to maintain our food sovereignty goal. Moved by Ellie. Second by Bing. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous, I think. Martin, did you vote? I might have missed it.
Yeah, I would be opposed. I don't like the idea of putting a meat processing plant right there. Such a nice area right across from the bison range.
Len's still out of the room. Motion carried. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much for
Solid
the
job.
opportunity to work on this, and we appreciate the business. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, which is actually 3.5 seconds. No. We're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll take a quick break.